How are you guys? Welcome back to Wargaming China. And today I thought I'd have a chat about the Soviet volunteer group. Now, I said in a previous video that Soviet military assistance to China was basically, we'll give it to you at we'll sell it to you at a very reasonable price and we'll deliver. Well, I thought I'd go into it more. And actually, I had a few surprises when I read a bit more into the Soviet volunteer group and Soviet aid than what I thought I would. Because, you think you know about a subject, but you don't really know anything until you know what you don't know. So, in 1937, after the Battle of Shanghai, China's air force had been almost annihilated. She had some reserve aircraft that were older models that hadn't seen combat during the battle, and the Soviet Union was well aware of Japanese aggression on their own border. So the Soviet Union signed a Non-Aggression Pact with China in 1937. Now, in August of 37, the Soviet Politburo the Soviet Union arranged for 452 pilots and mechanics, aircrew, and 160 odd planes to be sent to China from all over the world, actually, because some of the men were called back from duty in Spain and sent to China. Now, when the Soviet Union sent aid to China over land, it went via Kazakhstan and onto Lanzhou, which is basically the old Silk Road. Obviously, when she sent heavy materials like tanks, she chose the British Merchant Navy to deliver them. Now, the Soviet Union and China in the years previous to 1937, in the previous, say, 20 years, had some differences. In fact, Soviet incursions into Xinjiang province had occurred in 1932 and 1934, and many people in China did not like that the Soviets established the Republic of Mongolia. But when you're in need, you reach out to anybody. And so the Soviets and Chiang's government signed a Non-Aggression Pact, and as a result of this, 452 Soviet personnel and, as I said, up to 162 aircraft. I think it's 60 odd of the I-15 and 90 odd of the I-16 were sent to China. Now, I'm not going to go into the I-16 and the I-15 for one very good reason. There are far more experts on airplanes than me. And but I will say this: both aircraft came into production, in 33, 34. They were some of the first aircraft to have retractable landing gears. They were very tough aircraft, very maneuverable. But by 1937, and when China was going to get these aircraft, they were starting to be not so modern. I wouldn't say that it lost their combat edge, but certainly, they weren't cutting edge anymore by 1937. So, with this thawing of relationships between the Soviet Union and China, a result of this was in 1938, the Soviet Union extended Between 1938 and 1939, the Soviet Union extended $250 million worth of credit to Chiang's nationalist government to buy arms. However, the Soviet volunteer group didn't cost China, as far as I can see, it didn't cost China a penny. And if we look at the American volunteer group, China definitely had to pay for them. But the Soviet Union and Stalin felt that this was a military necessity. So when the men of the Soviet volunteer group arrived in China at Lanzhou, they were not put into squadrons of Soviet pilots and just Soviet formations. They were mixed through the existing Chinese Air Force. They were told when they were not on base to wear civvies, and when they flew in Chinese uniforms, Chinese Air Force uniforms. And the reason for this, the Russians would say, well, they're not Soviet citizens, they're former white Russians who are fighting for the Chinese. Now, if we look at the terms of operation of the Soviet volunteer group, it's an operation from 1938 to 1941. And in that time, during that time, China will receive up to nearly 900 aircraft of different models. So they received mainly I-15s and I-16s, but they also received, Tupolev SB twin-engine light attack bombers, and they received those massive four-engine strategic bombers that you see. I can't remember the name of them though. Anyway, because you remember, I do this off the top of my head. And if we want to look at operations of the Soviet volunteer group, we got to understand that at first, this was for the year 1938. These flyers would be the only Air Force China would have until she'd trained up new pilots and established new airfields because the Japanese were advancing. One of the operations that I looked at was in 1938 was a combined aerial attack on port facilities and airfields in Taiwan. Now, I was quite surprised to find out because, obviously most of my reading is about the ground war, and so they hit Taiwan in 1938 and they caused a lot of damage. It was aircraft of the Chinese Air Force along with Soviet volunteer group pilots, because as I said, they were intermixed with the Chinese Air Force, headed to Taiwan, bombed port facilities and hit airfields. Now they destroyed or damaged up to 20 Japanese aircraft, 2 ships and X amount of material. So, it was an offensive strike by the Chinese Air Force that, you don't hear much about, but it seems that what I read was a successful strike. Now, and then again, if we look at other Japanese air operations, we can look at quite a few where the Japanese would be celebrating perhaps the Emperor's birthday, or another military victory, or getting revenge for something. I mean, the Japanese like to put on heavy bombing raids and heavy air raids to celebrate certain events, military events. Now, they did one such thing, and it was met in the sky by members of the SVG in I-16s, and at the end of the day, the Japanese had lost 40 aircraft. So definitely an effective force, the SVG was. For China, there are monuments to the SVG all over China where they served. They served in Chongqing and Nanking. Nanjing at first, then Chongqing, and then I can't remember the name of the other airfield. But they certainly made an impact. They didn't cost China a penny other than the fuel. By the entry of the A5N Mitsubishi, the predecessor to the Zero, the Japanese had a habit of not putting too many machine guns in their planes. They liked maneuverability for the dogfights, whereas these planes, 4 machine guns for the I-16. I think it's 2 forward firing from the fuselage for the I-15. This was heavy firepower compared to what the Japanese were boasting. You know, Japanese fighters at this time were having 2 7.7mm machine guns in the wing, and that was it. There was no nose-mounted cannons fitting to any Japanese aircraft at this period. So, there you go, the SVG. Didn't cost China a cent. Were there from 1938 to 1941. Certainly made a difference. You know, you obviously know the other aid China received. If you don't know it, you know, I'll get to it. But it was from the Soviet Union. It was small arms and Soviet tanks, T-26s, and China was grateful for this. And the $250 million extended for in credit for military supplies. Well, what did they buy? They bought Type 30 Soviet Union manufactured 37mm anti-tank guns. They bought ex-British 4.7-inch howitzers, mountain guns. I'm not too hot on British artillery. Trucks. So there we go. There's the SVG. I know I rambled on a bit, but if you like that, press like. Hey, I'm always up for more new subscribers. So the SVG served from 1938 to 1941. There was a few aces. There were a few Soviet pilots became aces in China, quite a few. And by 1941, December 7th, the war in China would become World War II. In 1945, when World War II ended, the Chinese soldier would have fought with the least for the longest. Cheers. See ya.